Today is sentencing day for Brandon Straka, the founder of the Walkaway movement. This is a very important movement that has been a sort of vehicle for a lot of Democrats and leftists to move right, to move to the Republican Party, to become conservatives. And Straka is a young, dynamic, kind of a charismatic guy, quite a character. A few years ago, I took part in an event with him that he sponsored in Portland, kind of a walkaway event. And Antifa showed up. And the Antifa guys, I think, brought their sticks, and I think they thought they would cause trouble. They had already vandalized the venue, tried to break the lock and so on. But of course, this event had plenty of security, it had armed guards. And once the Antifa guys saw the guns, they had sticks. The security people had guns. They basically decided to quit, and they began to sulk and scowl, and one guy took out a flute and began to play it. The whole thing had a surreal quality, but I remember it vividly. Now, the government's sentencing recommendation. Now, Brandon Straka pleaded guilty to causing a disturbance, something that he actually didn't even do. But we're going to get to what he actually did. But the government wants to sentence him to 4 months of house arrest. So kind of, in effect, lock him up in his own house with an ankle monitor and so on. 3 years of probation, 60 hours of community service, and $500 of restitution. And now, when you think about this recommendation, it doesn't seem in and of itself something unendurable. In fact, Brandon Straka called me a few days ago, and he's like, "What do you think about this?" And I go, "Well, the sentence itself is stupid. Obviously, it's not a crime. It's not a grievous suffering to be confined to your own home." I go, "You can be very effective." What really was worrying Brandon the most was the fact that the left, and here I'm thinking of an article in Political magazine that Brandon alerted me to, Trump ally Straka has provided potentially significant information. And if you read the article, it looks like prosecutors are giving Brandon Straka a good deal, a kind of a light sentence, because he has sort of spilled the beans. He has sort of ratted out Trump. He's ratted out other conservatives. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. The so-called ratting out, well, Politico doesn't even know what the ratting out is, but they darkly imply that Straka is a kind of sellout to the conservative cause. But in fact, Brandon explained to me, he goes, "Listen, what this has to do with is the government had accused me originally of trying to grab a shield from a cop." Now, this would actually put Brandon's offense in a little different category. It would be a violent action. Brandon would be sort of scuffling with the cop, trying to grab his shield. And Brandon said that when you look at the video, it's very obvious that he isn't doing it. Someone else is grabbing the shield, and Brandon said, "I did my own research and I found out who it was. And I told the prosecutors, this is the guy, it's not me." And this was the, quote, new information. This was me cooperating with prosecutors to do what? Merely to identify the actual perpetrator of this violent act. Now, the prosecutors backed off, and in their description of Brandon's misdeeds, they now they do not claim that he tried to grab the shield. They say that somebody else was yelling, "Take it, take it," and Brandon evidently repeated, perhaps just because he heard it, the phrase in a low voice, "Take it, take it." He heard someone else say that. He repeated that. That is the sole, quote, interaction that Brandon had with the shield. He didn't, in fact, do anything with it. And now the government says that he, quote, did nothing to discourage the rioters from removing the shield. So he's now being faulted with inaction, not something he did, but what he failed to do. He didn't stop them. Now, in order to prove that Brandon was sort of instigating or somehow cooperating with the violence, remember, Brandon Straka did not enter the Capitol. Recently, when Adam Kinzinger tweeted, "No wonder they haven't arrested Ray Epps. Ray Epps didn't break the law. He didn't enter the Capitol." There are a number of people, the cowboy for Trump, Brandon Straka, who were arrested even though they did not set one foot into the Capitol. Nevertheless, the government tries to use Brandon's words from his social media posts to show that he was somehow participating or instigating violence. At one point, Straka says, quote, "Patriots at the Capitol, hold the line. Hold the line." But this is not unambiguously a call to violence at all. It's nothing more than, listen, don't give up, hang tough. I mean, remember, all the people who came to Washington came to hold the line, came ultimately to stand up for their beliefs and their beliefs about the election. At another point, they quote Brandon Straka saying, quote, Our government no longer listens and takes instructions from the people. They've decided to become dictators to the people. It's time to rise up. Whoop-de-doo. This is boilerplate political rhetoric. There's nothing violent about it. It's not an instigation to violence. It was uttered 1 month before January 6th, could hardly be called something that was causing a kind of imminent call to action. So again, Brandon Straka did not enter the Capitol, did not engage in any violence, does not possess any weapons, accepted responsibility for what he did, and submitted to 3 separate government interviews. You've got to sort of contrast Brandon's conduct. If you want to put it in perspective, here's Kamala Harris in the thrust of the Black Lives Matter arson and looting and rioting. Here's Kamala Harris. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. Everyone should take note of that on both levels. They're not going to stop, and they should not, and we should not. So talk about an endorsement of violent action in a direct manner by the current Vice President of the United States. And finally, we come to the government's most pathetic claim that somehow Brandon Straka is responsible for the entire actions of everyone there. Because, quote, if he didn't do what he did, they wouldn't do what they did. So this is a kind of sly attempt to sort of take other people's actions, in some cases violent actions, and transplant them onto Brandon Straka. He was part of this group, and, quote, the group did this, and the group did that. But Brandon's lawyers, I think very sensibly in the sentencing memo, say, listen, the defendant is not responsible for what other people did. The defendant is responsible, at least in a free society, for what he did, and his penalty, if anything, should be proportionate to what he did. As far as I can figure out, what Brandon Straka did was absolutely nothing. The guy deserves no penalty whatsoever. Obviously, he will get some penalty, but I hope the judge is smart enough to see that these are bogus charges. This is basically a bunch of nonsense, and no, Brandon Straka did not sell out the conservative movement.